We are watching a massive storm system take shape across the Central Plains that will spread heavy snow and rain for our upcoming weekend. We have all the details and more next at the Weather Farm. Welcome to your Wednesday, and we have the latest forecast on that storm that is set to impact the Central Plains by the time we get to our weekend. But first, let's look at our Wednesday morning as we see on the West Coast an atmospheric river making its way onshore from British Columbia down to Southern California. You're going to see extensive amounts of rain, and then in the higher elevations, you're going to see that mountain snow for your Wednesday. Across the rest of the country, it is generally a quiet start to our Wednesday. That will change as we will have a couple of areas of precipitation develop during the day on our Wednesday. In fact, when we get to Wednesday evening, this is 8 o'clock Eastern time. We see that atmospheric river continue to bring moisture onshore. We are going to watch an area of disturbed weather develop during the day on our Wednesday that could bring severe weather to places like Arkansas, eastern Texas, and western Louisiana. We could have a few discrete supercells develop during the day, and an isolated tornado cannot be ruled out during the day on our Wednesday. Across New York State, we're going to see the impact of those winds that's going to bring a light amount of snow as a warm front starts to lift to the northeast into places like New York and Vermont and Pennsylvania. So there's going to be enough lift in the atmosphere that we could churn out a few snowflakes and snow showers. In terms of our temperatures, though, we are going to see the heat confined to far southern Texas and central Texas, where we could see temperatures approaching 90, if not exceeding it. But we're going to see a widespread swath of 70s and 80s extending from eastern Colorado all the way to Virginia and down through Florida and along the Gulf Coast. Out west, where we're going to see that precipitation making its way onshore, temperatures are going to be held down there in the 40s and 50s. We really have to go into far northern Maine and far northern New Hampshire to find any cold temperatures below freezing for our Wednesday. Their temperatures will be in the 20s. And even if we look across the Canadian prairies, we see that the real core of the cold is bottled up far north of the Canadian border near Hudson Bay, and that's where it's going to remain for several days. In terms of our precipitation, as that system makes its way onshore through our Thursday morning, we could see widespread 1 to 2 inches of rain from Washington State down through Oregon. As we get down towards the California border, we could see an isolated area, 2 to 4 inches of rain, possibly 5 inches in some locations. And that 1 to 2 inch swath continues down along the California coast as we make our way down towards Los Angeles and San Diego. Half an inch to an inch of rain is likely by the time we wake up on Thursday. As we make our way into our Thursday, we see that system continue to bring moisture onto the west coast. That system that developed with the scattered severe weather across the deep south on Wednesday evening, that's kind of fizzling out as it makes its way into Mississippi and Alabama. And we see light snow showers across the Canadian provinces. As we make our way to Friday, we see more moisture being pummeled onto the west coast. This is going to provide an additional 1 or 2, possibly 3 additional inches of rain. By the time we get to Friday morning, we turn our attention, though, to that area of low pressure that is in eastern Colorado. This is a 979 millibar low. If you joined our video on Monday, you probably recall that we were talking that this low could be anywhere from 967 to 973. What we've seen over the last few model runs is that the pressure of this low has risen slightly, about 4 or 5 millibars. And so that is not going to be as deep as and intense as maybe what we once thought. The all-time record for a low pressure in the month of March is 972 millibars. We thought we could rival that, but the latest model runs, again, are not hinting at that deep of a low right now. And that's why we pay attention to trends in the 4 to 5 day outlook. And as we get closer, now that we're 48 hours out from the event, we're now beginning to hone in on some of the more specifics. There's still a lot to iron out with this particular system, and we'll bring you the latest on it. But here's our latest think. Snow will be flying across Montana, Wyoming, and western Colorado by the time we wake up on our Friday morning. Out ahead of it through Kansas, through Oklahoma, and the panhandle of Texas, even northeastern New Mexico, those tight lines of equal pressure, we're going to have a tight pressure gradient here, and that's going to generate a lot of wind. And so one of the things that I'm not hearing a lot of people talk about is the fire danger. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this video. But for right now, I do want you to be aware that it is going to be a rain and snow event, but we're going to have wind impacting this system as well. And by the time we get to Friday afternoon, you can clearly see where that low pressure is, as you see that kind of comma shape with the yellow and green temperature bands across eastern Nebraska and northwestern Missouri. That is where the low pressure is going to be. That's where temperatures are going to be held down the most. But out ahead of it, with that counterclockwise rotation, we're going to pump those warm temperatures that are approaching the century mark in southern Texas and 80s all across the deep south. We're going to pump that warmth all the way up into Minnesota, where we can see temperatures in the low to mid 70s by our Friday afternoon. This is going to just add fuel to the system that's going to allow the possibility of severe weather. Let's just put the whole system into motion. And so we see that low pressure making its way through Nebraska, storms and heavy rain making their way through Michigan and Indiana on our Friday, snow across the Dakotas into Minnesota. But that secondary low forms down in the south, and that's going to really provide the mechanism for those severe weather to break out on our Saturday. And all that moves to the East Coast by the time we get to Sunday afternoon. The Storm Prediction Center has gone ahead and issued an enhanced risk of severe weather from central Illinois down through Arkansas and western Mississippi for our Friday. We have a slight risk extending all the way up towards Minneapolis, but down through Louisiana. And we feel that in that brownish color, that is where we will see the most likely scenario of supercell development. But we're going to continue to watch the model runs. I do think the best forcing and the best mechanisms for severe weather are going to stay probably south of Missouri and Kentucky, more in the Arkansas and Tennessee range. But no doubt we will have heavy rains, we will have strong winds, and with the particular system as it makes its way through the Ohio Valley. And on Saturday, we see a marginal risk extending up through Ohio down to the Gulf. And I think we could have isolated supercells, but our main focus, and where I think the most impactful tornadic outbreak is going to occur on Saturday, is going to be from Mississippi to Alabama towards Atlanta. Even into southeastern Tennessee, you're going to want to be on guard for the possibility of severe weather as we make our way to the afternoon. One thing that we want to talk about is the dew points that are going to be surging with this particular storm. We're going to see dew points as high as the mid-50s through the Ohio Valley. And it's one of those reasons I don't think we're going to see the supercell development that far north, because mid-50s is kind of marginal, but where we see the dew points nearing 60 and 60s along the Dixie Alley, we will see the greatest chance. This is our supercell composite index. We do see on Friday afternoon a chance of supercell development across Missouri and Illinois, but again, it's Saturday across Mississippi, Alabama, along the Gulf, where we see the greatest values of that supercell composite index, leading us to believe that is where the most severe weather is going to be focused. Again, not that you're not going to have heavy rain or wind with this particular system, but I think the severe weather will be to the south. When we look at the storm relative helicities, we look for those reds and those purples. Those tend to stay south of the Ohio Valley, through the Tennessee Valley, through the deep south. And again, this is another confirming factor of why we think it's Saturday we're going to see the more severe weather outbreak with this particular system. And our last map that we are going to look at is the energy helicity index. So it combines the CAPE, the instability in the atmosphere, with the storm relative helicity. And when we start seeing those yellows, that's where we have a good confidence that we're going to see some severe weather development. So we keep our eye out for supercells or discrete storms or even tornadoes in those yellow areas. And it's more a Saturday event that we are focused on. And this is another reason why we think that, again, as we make our way into central Illinois, that risk is marginal. This is sounding a SKU-T analysis from central Illinois at about 10 o'clock Eastern time on our Friday night. And so one thing I want to point out is we have this white dashed line. That is the cap in the atmosphere. So when the red line, the temperature line, When it's to the left of the white line, air parcels are free to move up in the atmosphere and rise and build up thunderstorms with that upward motion. However, when that red line moves to the right of the white dashed line, that's where the cap occurs. Air parcels are no longer able to move up in the atmosphere. They are capped. They get blocked at that level of the atmosphere. And it's kind of what that purple EL means, is that's the equilibrium layer. That's the layer at which we see air parcels rising to and then stopping. And so where we see that equilibrium level taking place, there at the 550 millibar level, about 12 or 14,000 feet up in the atmosphere, that means air parcels can rise to that level and then they can't rise any further. And so that really inhibits the storms from developing those tall cumulonimbus clouds that we need for storm development. They can't rise high in the atmosphere. So that's why we believe that with this particular system, as it moves through Illinois on our Friday, we're not going to see the severe weather. Yes, we do have some high Cape values around 600. We do have some storm relative helicities nearing 200, which would indicate the possibility of severe weather. But it is that cap that's going to really limit the development of the storms. But right now, we don't see that developing, as opposed to what we will see Saturday afternoon along down in Mississippi. And this is a sounding analysis taken from that time period. So again, we see that red temperature line staying to the left of the white dash line all the way up to about the 300 millibar level. That's about where the jet stream resides, about 9 kilometers up, 20, 30,000. And so this is going to give us more of lift in the atmosphere. It's going to allow those strong updrafts to develop with this particular system. We see much higher Cape values in excess of 1,000. We see storm relative helicities over 300. We also see that energy helicity index approaching 2. And when we see that happening, again, that is another indicator of the possibility of strong tornadic supercell development. So this is why we believe Saturday is going to be the more intense day, and it's going to be more in the deep south as opposed to an Ohio Valley or Tennessee Valley event. And by the time we get to Sunday morning, we see the remnants of that severe weather making its way through the Carolinas. That low pressure system is continuing to make its way north towards Hudson Bay, bringing snow across western Ontario. And out west, look again, we have yet another atmospheric river making its way on shore. And it's that system that we're going to talk about a little bit later that's going to drive our next chance of severe weather and significant snowstorms. Again, the West Coast is just going to get pummeled, heavy amounts of rain. I did mention that storm system on the West Coast that moves in on Sunday as being a thing to watch. And already NOAA has issued a risk of heavy snow from Nebraska through Minnesota to Wisconsin to the UP of Michigan by the time we get to the middle of next week. So we could be replaying a lot of this same scenario by the time we get to next Wednesday. It's something we're definitely going to be watching, and we will bring you the latest details as they become available. I mentioned the winds were going to be strong. We're going to see winds 50, 60 miles per hour across New Mexico and Texas on our Friday. Those strong winds move into the Ohio Valley, where we could see gusts up to 50 or 60 miles per hour, and across the deep south through Tennessee on our Sunday, and we're going to see those winds, again, 50 to 60 mile per hour. As we make our way through our Sunday afternoon, that energy is going to transfer to the East Coast, and we would expect strong winds at that time. And this is one of the things that I've mentioned we are going to have to be very concerned about, is the fire threat from New Mexico through the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, all the way up to central Nebraska. As that system moves through and we have those strong winds, relative humidities dropping to about 15%, dew points plummeting down into the teens, we're going to have widespread critical fire danger for our Thursday into our Friday. We have an elevated risk that makes its way all the way into South Dakota. So that is another factor that we are going to have to keep in mind. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Please let us know your comments, your questions, things that you want to know. Like, share, subscribe, click that bell notification icon so you can be notified when we have the latest information available or we put up new videos. We hope to see you again real soon, and have a wonderful Wednesday.